So I was 20, living in the big city and getting paid to be an actress. It was fantastic. I would finish my classes, speed through my homework, and swallow my dinner in 15 minutes. And then I would catch a ride to the theater. They call it a theater, but it was actually like an empty storefront that belonged to somebody's relatives. It was a complete dive when we started. I mean, dusty, dirty, damp. We would have cleaning parties where the cast would get together and just scrub the place. And then we painted it all black. Oh, they hadn't paid the bills in a year. So our first few weeks of rehearsal in January, we had space heaters because they couldn't afford the deposit for the gas bill. And the show was complete chaos. Hedda and Loveborg were sleeping with each other and broke up a few weeks into rehearsal and wouldn't speak to each other off stage. The show had no money. Turns out they expected to raise the money for lights and set and costumes with advanced ticket sales. But they had nobody lined up to do promotions. I know. Oh, and the actress playing the maid quit 2 weeks before we opened because the cold and the dust were giving her asthma attacks. Oh, during a tech rehearsal, the director walked out and didn't return for 3 hours. The fire marshal showed up a few days before opening and wrote us up. The whole thing should have crashed and burned. But somehow it didn't. It turns out that nobody had done Hedda Gabler here in years. And there's a huge Norwegian population in Portland. So the Oregonian and the Colombian actually gave us a pretty decent write-up before we opened. Opening night, we had a full house, which actually means about 40 people, mostly family and friends, sitting on folding chairs on platforms. But at least we could say we were sold out.
And what did the critics have to say?
Oh, they loved it. Well, not completely, but on the whole. I mean, they had a few complaints. They didn't care for the director, and they thought Loveborg was way over his head.
Oh, minor quibbles. What did they have to say about you?
Oh, the Oregonian said that I was appealing. Your paper didn't say a thing about me.
Oh, so you don't just have it in from Milson. You want revenge on the whole institution.
No, no. It was just one of those write-ups where the interviewer spends about 90% of his time showing off how much knowledge he has on the 19th century theater, and about 10% on the show he actually saw. I mean, he barely said anything about the actress playing Hedda, let alone the smaller parts.
No offense, but I usually write that sort of review when the history of 19th century theater is more interesting than the play I actually saw.
I didn't care about the reviews. I mean, it was an actress, a long way from Astoria, getting paid to be in a play that people were paying money to see. I actually didn't get paid what I was supposed to, though. The producers came back and said that they were way over budget and that they could only afford to pay us half of what they had promised. I just took what they gave me. I wasn't doing it for the money.
Outside of a few sharks in New York, nobody in theater is doing it for the money. That's why nobody makes any.
Is that wrong?
No. It couldn't be more right. I mean, it means artists are in charge. You know how we artists love our poverty. And poverty is the surest validation of our integrity. If theater were a moneymaker, we'd have to cut businessmen in on the deal, and then they would force us to produce crap that the common man might actually want to see. Poverty enables us to keep our standards up, and the great unwashed out of our theaters.
So cynical, so young. So what would you do?
Not a thing. You know, most days I love theater just as it is. But let's be honest and admit that contemporary theater is for the elite, and that we put up barriers to entry just like any other industry. Except our barrier to entry is poverty. Well, fortunately, we have a steady stream of stage-struck youth to keep us afloat. Because just like you, they're not doing it for the money.